Willkommen. Ich freue mich, dass ich hier sein darf. And now I switch to English because I live in Austria. I'm very proud to be in Austria, and I'm very proud that we have this thing here together with the Austrian Hub. One of my managers once said, good business is not about good ideas, but it's about good execution. And we heard about a lot of ideas where we need to go. I think everybody understands the concept, but Gaia-X also is responsible to some extent on thinking about how to operationalize those ideas. So a journey from an operations perspective is really where we say, where did we start? So before November 22, where we had our summit in Paris, we did a lot of conceptual work. We came up with the Gaia-X framework that is really giving you the building blocks for a trust framework. And from there, we said we need to take it to the next level. So in Paris, we started to prototype it. So together with the Federation Services projects and with Pierre, our CTO, who will be there later, we actually built a prototype that we could really understand the use case, how it works and how it's done and how it's executed. And from there, we made the promise that we're going to give you a digital clearinghouse, which I will come to later, because that's one of the fundamental parts of the realization of a trust framework. When you think about it, when you write rules, like we did in the Gaia-X framework, and a lot of documents that we produced where we establish rules, where we establish mechanisms, where we define, for example, how labels work. The problem is, if you just have those blueprints and you send them out and you have two projects, you can control the two projects and make sure everybody plays to the book. But if you have 50 projects, it's going to be very difficult. And if you have, as we have now, over 115 projects, it's impossible. It's impossible to control the sovereignty of the code and of the services as such. So that's why we decided we need to build a digital clearinghouse. And we promised that it's going to be available end of Q1, and we will launch it today. The core functions are in there. The release is called Tagos, and it will hold the basic functions that you need. But we can expand it from there quite easily with minor releases and some new functionality. So this is really where we are today at Market-X. We're talking about deployment, so we have the code ready. We're working with the deployment partners with the initial ones, and we will also see that there is a lot of interest in additional digital clearinghouses, simply to make this, I call it the democratization of a trust framework. It's really a lot of nodes, federated services, not tied to one single place. And then finally, the next step is growth. Now we have the prerequisites, we have the large lighthouse projects, we have a lot of other projects who want to grow. And one of the reasons why we think we believe we can grow fast is this event here. It's the first time where we bring together people that have projects, people that are working in the association. We're bringing together Data Space Business Alliance. We're bringing together the hubs. We're bringing technology providers. So you have the entire community here. So you can go back in the afternoon in the expo area and see and understand what we're doing, how you can get solutions, and how we can move forward from here. Now, let me talk a moment about how trust works, because one of the things we wanted to do in this event, this is an open event, so it's not only Gaia-X members. Of course, I encourage you all to become member, because that's the way where you can contribute and you can also be part of the definition bodies. But the big thing is, if you want to grow your network, you can't make a family business, so you need to invite everybody, and that's why this is so open, and that's why I want to explain this concept again. We have three pillars. One is the compliance service, one is the labels, and the last one is industry specifications. And it's important to understand who is the governance body. So for the first two, the ISBL is the governance body. So we define what's in it, and it is basically the attributes and criteria you need to decide, and then you need to decide how you can control them, what your trust anchors are, and that is how you can actually enable trust. So the compliance framework is mandatory, the labels are optional, And finally, the industry specifics are optional, of course, but this is where you do all the regulations and all the stuff you need to have for your specific industry. And the basic concept is that the participant is actually raising a claim, first about his own identity. That claim gets, then you can add additional claims, for example, for a service you are providing, and then those claims getting certified by the conformity assessment bodies, and this is how you can create trust, which is gonna put in the registry, so that from there, everybody else who is participating can basically look into this and get a trustful signature and say, if you say my service is 20,000 ISO 20000 certified, you actually get it. Now, we used in Paris a case that I also would like to reiterate in a very short way. Number one, we said we have a company which is Dufour. It's basically a provider. So Dufour, let's say they are an IT provider, they have storage services, network services, web services, whatever. And then we have another company that has data. In our example, it was Montblanc. They are having data from a sensor network in the Alps. Now, the sensor network guys say, we want to monetize our data. So what they need is they need a trustful partner to host the data because they want to create a business model. And so what they do is they will look up in the catalog, they will find Dufour because they want to have a company that runs under European values, that is trustworthy. So they go and join forces with Dufour, but because they're both part of the Gaia-X infrastructure in the same framework, they can initially trust each other. So there's no real big negotiation necessary. There's not an endless discussion of lawyers writing MOUs and LOIs. They just simply can go forward when they trust the framework. And with that, they provide data in a consumable way, and that makes something which is really interesting, because when you look at the three circles at the top, there is three other data spaces that all of a sudden get interested in the data and they can start using it. So in this case, we said it's about environmental data, tourism in Austria. Tourism areas start, for example, for ski passes. They want to charge different prices depending on how much snow you have and how the weather is. That is data they could basically use instantly. Now, this is all good from a business perspective. Unfortunately, there is some stuff you need to do to get it to make it happen. And this is the process, very high level, how it works. So first of all, Dufour registers themselves and say, we are Dufour. And this is something where you get verifiable credential, a personal verifiable credential. And from there on, you can register all your services, and you also get credentials for your services. And finally, you get all the services in a catalog. Now, if your consumer, then on the other hand side, which is Montblanc, wants to use one of those services based on different criteria. So not only technical criteria like so and so many data space or and so much storage, whatever, but also qualities like I want it hosted in Europe. I want to have a partner that is ISO 27000 certified, whatever you need. You can find that in the catalog. So what those guys are doing then is they start working together with Dufour, and they are creating their own services, and then they publish their services in a catalog, and all of a sudden you have a catalog that consists of a new high-level service that is using an infrastructure service underneath, but the entire value chain is trustworthy and is certified under Gaia-X terms. Now, some could wonder how this all works, and this is the digital clearinghouse. All these functions that you see in the blue circles are functions of the digital clearinghouse, even in the first iteration. So in the Tagus launch by the end of this month, you will have all these functions in the clearinghouse, and wherever you are and whatever clearinghouse you use, which provider you choose, you can basically make that business case happen by the end of March this year. And I think this is really a very strong message, because you don't need to take care about your trust framework on your own. You can focus on your business model, and you can basically get the trust from the partners that are running the clearinghouses. So I already explained what it is. It's basically a node of verification. This is where you obtain everything you need and obtain compliance. I always get the question, what is compliance? Well, for now, compliance is that you get yourself and your services certified through the compliance notarization and registry services in the in the clearinghouse, and this is what you need to get started in an ecosystem. We will not run this as an ISBL. We are an association. It will be run by independent providers that stick to the rules that we are at this point in time generating together. But we will keep governance. And it's important that we keep governance for the reason I said earlier. We're not controlling 200 or 1,000 projects, but we need to control that whatever the association and its members define will be implemented in a proper way. So there is external software projects like the Federation Services projects and maybe lighthouse projects that are producing components, but we need to make sure that those components are really in line with our specifications so that you as a user don't need to do this anymore. One last word to the clearinghouse. The components you see here are the components in release 1. So there is the registry. This is where the links to all the certifications are stored. Then the Gaia-X compliance, that's the service that is actually creating your compliance tag to make your self-description a verifiable credential, and the notarization services. And then there is 2 optional services. One is the wizard, and that is really important because the wizard is something that lowers the entry barrier for small and medium enterprises especially. This is where you can describe your service in a normal human language, and it's getting translated in the digital format you need, which is a JSON file. And so the wizard will help you to have easy access to proper self-descriptions. And finally, you have the catalog. This is where all these services get stored in a decentralized way where you can access the information. Now, the other thing that I said about growth is we're talking about lighthouse projects, and I'm very happy that I can announce 2 more lighthouse projects. One is Omega-X in the energy sector, and the other one is Gaia-X for future mobility, together with the DLR in Germany and the German hub, which is in the area of mobility and transportation. We will have them on a panel tomorrow, so we will see more details where we're going with this one. But you can see there is a lot of very prominent projects that we have right now, but now is also the time to grow, not focusing only on lighthouse projects. Well, we need to focus on contribution to Gaia-X so that the projects and the clearinghouse providers give us not only feedback, but they also help us understand what we can use from them, because we don't need to create a certain service over and over again. There is certain components and solutions that we can reuse, whether it's architecture or code. So you're all invited to contribute to the Gaia-X software repository and the open source community at any time. So these are the 2 new projects. As I said earlier, one is in the energy data space to boost the European data economy. The other one is actually made out of 6 components, and I want to encourage you to, in the afternoon when you are in the expo area, to talk to them. They're both here. They have a lot to say. They have a lot of interesting concepts. They have a lot of good stuff already. I know a bit more about the Gaia-X for future mobility. They really have 6 projects underneath one umbrella that is really solving a lot of problems we have in mobility in future, communication to cars, connection to smart cities. There is really a very interesting framework. Now, as we said, we're delivering something, we're not operating it. You might ask, how are we going to do this? And we are doing this with release management. So I'm talking about operationalization. So how we're going to bring it down. This is really how we do this in a release plan, because we need innovation on one side and evolution, but we need reliability on the other side, because now projects start using it, and behind projects is industry, and behind industry is money. So you need to have a reliable framework on what you do, and that is our release strategy, where we are looking into a very agile release strategy to say we give you trust, we give you reliability, but we also push innovation, because we are at the very beginning of this journey. More in detail, you can see we are here today launching the Tagus release, which is the first set of services from the clearinghouse. This release will continue for a long time because we have an N-1 release strategy, meaning that the last release and the actual release is still valid and compliant. So we will have GA by the end of the month, And then we have a couple of minor releases. And minor releases means you don't need to change anything, but there is more features from a user perspective that you can actually use and pull. So without changing APIs, without changing the mandatory components, we're adding additional features that will help you to gain more and more benefits out of this. Secondly, the next release has codename Loire. We are currently starting specification in the ISBL, so if you want to be part of the guys who are making specifications, again, I invite you to become members, because only members are defining specifications. And then we will have specs approved at some point, and then we go into development and testing with external development organizations again. So we are only providing governance and guidance for the development and making sure that the specifications are implemented properly. And then at some point we will stop adding new features so that we keep the release schedule that we actually promised. And at that point, at some point there will be in 2024 the launch date of Loire, which will then be GA. And don't forget, those two releases will run in parallel. So if you start your project today, you are using Tagus and you have a release schedule that wouldn't allow you to immediately jump on Loire, and you don't have technical or business reasons to do so, you can stick with Tagus for a while, because only if the next release, where we don't even have a code name yet, is GA, Tagus will be obsolete. But I think we will get more pressure from the market for new functionality and new features, so that we will have a lot of early adopters, because we are moving really fast. Now, as we have the technical background and we have the processes and the release strategy, the next thing is on growth is how we're going to engage with the market. And we started last year in Palma, in a conference where we brought together the industry verticals and the hubs, which are the national organizations. And we figured that there is a lot of need to discuss and bring them together. When you look at the verticals, we need to make sure that the verticals are adopted in many, many countries, because there is focus areas for certain verticals today. And I always say, steal with pride is the right strategy right now. So make sure you copy a lot of good initiatives in other countries. And secondly, we want to grow horizontally. This is growing horizontally. Secondly, we want to grow vertically to say, let's get more projects in verticals, and we can also get more verticals. So we have reorganized the verticals. They are supported by one of our committees, the Data Space and Business Committee, which is closely linked to the DSBA you just saw earlier today. And so we are talking to the verticals because this is where the real business cases happen. And this is one way of growth, and this is exactly what we're also trying to foster here, to bring together the verticals, the hubs, and the existing projects to accelerate this. And we are really at that point where this is accelerating fast, and you will see this in the afternoon. And finally, it's not only about verticals and hubs. We have also an internationalization strategy, and that is twofold. One is we want to get more hubs and more support from the countries, from the policymakers like Florian we had this morning. This is also about getting a better reach in Europe and getting a reach beyond Europe. And why do I say beyond Europe? Most of our digital value chains today don't stop at borders. So those digital value chains reach very far. And if you, for example, only look at Europe, then you could, for example, have one company that is doing a certain piece of a car. And if that company is, for example, Bosch, you can do it in Europe. But the problem is there's many components in that Bosch component that are not from Europe. So if you really want to get an end-to-end control about your value chains, you need to reach beyond. And that's why last year we had the opportunity to announce 3 hubs in the US, in California, Texas, and Washington. We have a hub in South Korea, and we have a hub in Japan. We are talking with Australia and New Zealand, and just recently we started with Smart Africa. It is really important that we understand it's global business, global businesses with global value chains, and that's how we approach it right now. And finally, my last slide is really, I told you what the journey are, and we are here today. So we are at that point where we're starting to accelerate. So please keep this in mind. This is not conceptual anymore. And this is also not on demo level anymore. What we have right now is we have real projects, we have real business, we have a lot of members. I think the latest number of registrations for this event was 600, and we kept it at 600. And this is important to understand because we only have, I think, 350 or 360 members. And this is where growth happens. This is where we create trust. And let's grow together.